welcome to Iconic Talk. This is your community's podcast with conversations about real estate, local happenings, and all things Winchester, Virginia. My name's Mark Francis, a local broker, realtor, and owner of Icon Real Estate. If you want local knowledge, you have come to the right place. Well, once again, I'm flying solo today. It's perfectly fine. I'm able to do that, but it still makes me feel like I'm missing a part of myself. Megan is not here today with us, but she will recover and come back to us next week, so I'm looking forward to that. And even though she's not here, let me just give a quick summary and recap. This week is a busy week for graduations, as we summarized last week, so that's going to be happening in my world today and tomorrow and over the course of these next couple days. Last week, just reporting back, I told you how I was going to be playing in a golf tournament. That was successful, so we supported Blue Ridge Soccer for that. And, we have Memorial Day coming up this coming weekend as well. So there's a lot of things around Winchester that is exciting. The spring is here, things to look forward to. But today we're going to turn to a topic in the real estate world that we have not covered yet on our Iconic Talk podcast. I'm excited about it because it's a world that I don't know too much about, admittedly, and I'm a realtor, and things happen in this world that I just turn to the experts. And today, that's what we're going to do. And this has to do with septic fields. So just giving a little bit of context, if you're not aware as a homeowner, you either live in a location where there's public water and public sewer, or you live in a world where you have a well and you have a septic system. And so our area is filled with a combination of, I'm not sure what the split is. I'd say it's probably in the Winchester-Frederick County area, at least a 50-50 split, if not more people that have the well and septic package deal. And well water is obviously free once you put it in there, and septic is obviously free as well. But there's a little bit of maintenance part of it. When you're in the city or you're in a county neighborhood where you have the public water and the public sewer, you pay fees for that. So some people appreciate living with well and septic. But I say I don't know much about it because there's multiple kinds of systems out there. There are things that some people just say out of sight, out of mind, and we're about ready to hear why that's not necessarily a good idea. So I was able to turn to a friend of mine who I've met years ago out at a job site, knowing that, okay, this is somebody that I need to rely on since he is the expert and I'm not. His name is Matt Ferrell. And it's funny, before we got him on, I was like, just remind me, of how to go about spelling and pronouncing your name. And he says, yeah, it's like Matt Ferrell, like Will Ferrell. And everybody knows who that comedian and that actor is, obviously. And I said, do you get people to ask you if you're related? He says, sometimes I try to pawn that off like I am. They don't look exactly alike, though. But he's going to explain things even more succinctly than I can do to give the intro of leading up to it. So here's my conversation with Matt Ferrell from Onsite Wastewater Service. And he has a fascinating story and he has incredible knowledge. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Matt. Well, I'm here with Matt Ferrell from Onsite Wastewater Service. How are you?
Doing well.
Thanks so much for being here. And we've done multiple different deals together. I say deal. You probably treat it as just like, hey, I'm just showing up somebody's house and working on septic systems, right?
Just trying to make water go downhill and stay in the ground.
That's an easy way of explaining it. I love it. Well, before we get really to the down and dirty of it all, yes, pun intended there. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Like, where are you from? How'd you come to Winchester?
So I have probably the weirdest story in septic. I grew up in Manassas on sewer.
Okay.
My experience with excavation prior to college was I got suckered into trading a PlayStation 2 for 14 holes in my parents' yard, which was for their trees.
Wow, okay.
I signed up for that thinking that it was going to be amazing. I didn't realize they had bought 50-gallon trees. Took a whole summer. They definitely won on that deal.
Wow.
Then went on a big roundabout kind of story. I went to college. While I was in college, I stumbled across a new species. spent my time there traveling the world telling everyone about that. Got hired for an aquaponics specialist at the head of WVU as a fishery scientist.
Wow.
And over the course of some things that there was a layoff because of a budgetary issue. And when I got out of that, my neighbor was having his septic pumped. And I was like, you know what? I should probably have mine done too. And I ran through the woods, grabbed the guy, said, hey, can you help me out? And he said, I'll challenge you to something. If you can have your septic dug before I get there, I'll give you half price. He looked at me, my flip-flops, my Prius, and knew that there's no way possible I could ever do that.
Yeah.
Well, he was wrong. I love a deal. And I dug a 3-foot by 2-foot hole before he got to the end of my driveway, and I got that half-off deal.
Love it.
And then turns out that the world of septic has changed tremendously from what most people expect is a box in the ground. And there was a bunch of new licensing requirement. Well, those licensing requirements were actually what I used to design at WVU for commercial aquaculture.
So go back to WVU. That's fascinating. So did you come out with a degree at all? Like, what did you?
Oh no, I mean I'm fully science.
Science?
No, so I actually went to Auburn University.
Okay.
And so they hired me. I was in a trip on San Diego, and I found a paper that I really liked. And this story gets really long really fast. But basically, I got suckered back into coming to West Virginia because they couldn't find anyone that knew how to integrate plants and fish together. That was what I was doing in my backyard is for fun when I was in college. And I ended up the head of an entire farm really quick.
Yeah.
And we spent a lot of money. We came up with a lot of really new technology, but unfortunately West Virginia's budget did not find that advantageous to continue. So $7 million later in 3 years, we just mothballed that project, and it's now got a tree growing through it.
Wow.
But before that, I was worldwide getting phone calls 2-3 in the morning asking questions about how to grow this one plant behind fish.
The plant and fish.
And what's interesting is alternative septic is what we have in people's yards right now. It's the same technology.
Interesting.
It's
so
literally fish filters.
So you're taking your background with that, and then I probably cut you off with your story, but so you dug a hole to get a discounted deal for your own personal septic. Yeah. And then were there light bulb moments that went on and said, okay, I need to merge what I know about?
So that operator asked me, he said, how did you learn how to dig this fast? And how did you, he's like, I actually had a lot of ideas about who you were, but based on looking at you, but obviously you've proved me wrong. And he wouldn't even tell me where he lived. He wanted me to interview. I ended up having an interview at McDonald's because he didn't want a guy with a Prius pulling into his property. And I'm not kidding. That really happened. But the moral of the story on this one is that he couldn't exist without my knowledge and continue his business. And so I got hired there to hold their license, and then I trained their staff because I was an educator in extension. And I trained their staff on how to do it. And then there was a time that both of us said, let's just divide and conquer. You stay over here, I'll stay over here. And in the very beginning, we worked pretty close together. But as I grew, very slowly, 3 to 5 years, I worked out of a Prius.
Wow.
I was the laughing stock of septic.
How do you do that?
Did you know that a 4-inch, 10-foot pipe fits in a Prius times 4 sideways?
Oh my goodness! So you're going back and forth a few different times to the shop or to the store to get all the materials to the site.
And I had no excavator, I had no skid steer, and I have my hands have healed, but I used to have calluses like you wouldn't believe, and it was literally sheer grit and determination because I have a family that I couldn't leave here, and at least a son, and so that kept me tied to this county, and so I had to reinvent myself. Was it my favorite thing? No, but in the end, it's one of the most blessings I've ever had in my life. I just couldn't quit.
Yeah. So how long ago was that?
I'm really bad at timelines. I want to say about 10 years ago now.
Wow.
And I did at least 3 years sole Prius, and I would pull up their house. I was like, believe me, the reason I'm cheap is because I get to drive this car versus a $100,000 diesel truck that never turns off when it's here. Yep. But now we got the diesel trucks. Yeah. I do turn mine off in the driveway though. There's no need to idle it the whole time I'm working.
That's a good thing. Yeah. Well, so I'm gonna play very dumb here. Yes, I'm a realtor and I pretend to know a little bit about septic systems, but I'll be honest because I don't know a lot. I almost don't want to know, but I'm wanting to know now because I feel like there are a whole variety of septic systems that exist, And I also feel like around here, locally, there's a couple different options that people, and that at least I encounter as a realtor, depending on the location, depending on the condition of the land and the house and the age of the system that might have already existed. Walk us through, just put your educator hat on.
Yeah.
Walk us through the top couple septic systems that you come across here, and how do they operate? Because you said something very fascinating when you first started talking. You said you just make sure the water and stuff runs downhill.
So,
right? Is that too simple, or is that an easy way of breaking it down?
I'm going to break it down into 3 categories. We have pre-1980.
Okay.
Pre-1980, you could walk up with a napkin to the health department with an idea and a drawing, and it'd probably be accepted.
Mm-hmm.
Back before 1980, we had large land masses and small houses. These people used water very conservatively. They did not leave it on. They did not have appliances that ran water nonstop. They did laundry once a week, at best.
Mm-hmm.
Showers were not an everyday thing, believe it or not. And these systems tend to have concrete septic tanks, a concrete and or homemade distribution box, which can be cinder blocks laid on their side with a poured foundation, and then they smeared a ceiling concrete, and then they just shoved clay pipes through that foundation.
So for those that don't even know, explain a distribution box.
So if we are going to describe a septic system, we're going to go one step back. A septic tank is a trash can. Don't think of it anything more. I cannot tell you how many people open it up and say, oh my gosh, it's full. All septic tanks are full. What you don't want is that the pipe that's exiting to have any sort of water standing inside of it. That means it's not draining very well. But when waste goes into a septic tank, solid settle paper floats. We actually are grabbing the clear water in the dead center of it. All right? So we go from the trash can to an exhaust manifold on a car for many people. That seems to work. So you take a box that's now receiving somewhat clear water. Believe it or not, in some houses, it's crystal clear without the scent. You would have no idea it was ever in a toilet or anything in the waste. That is broken apart to however many drain lines are in the house. The older the house, the less drain lines, because again, they didn't use that much water. They didn't need the square footage to get rid of it. Our modern drain fields that use gravel use 100 foot. Older ones use about 50 foot. So this distribution box, in order for it to work properly, it needs to be level and it needs to have the same amount of water going to each line. Otherwise, one line is working exponentially harder than the rest, because unless you have a ton of water coming in, it's going to be bone dry. All right. The type of pipes that used to be allowed off the distribution box, we have everything from literally tar paper.
Wow.
To clay pipes that were kiln fired, and those ones are the most impressive. You can dig them out. They could be 60 years old and they're still shiny if they're not clogged. But those ones were not solid. They're 1 foot length.
Okay.
They've been smushed together, and each one of their cracks is where the water comes out.
Oh, wow. And on purpose.
On purpose.
Yeah. So it leaves the distribution box and then goes to what I would call a drain field.
To the drain field.
Yes.
But on those corrugated ones, it starts to leak as soon as it leaves the box. And this is problematic in today's world, because if you have a bunch of pipes leaking side by side, it could bubble at the surface.
Okay.
All right. In a modern system, the distribution box has solid pipes that leave it called headers.
Okay.
And then they turn into the drain field. And when the drain field starts, that's where the gravel and the holes in the pipe begin.
So how deep in the ground should those pipes be after they're going through the distribution box?
That has a lot to do with the soil around here. And today, right now, we're installing, as we speak, 3 drain fields. One I'm putting in at 13 inches and one I'm putting at 3.5 feet deep. It's all based on the soil. We also have a drain field now that is the same as irrigation line, drip irrigation. And those things can't be any bigger than your thumb in size. That's how far we've come with technology.
Yeah.
But if we stay with the old ones, it really can be as close to the surface, and you can almost feel them when you walk over it, or it can be 3 feet, 4 feet down and has been covered up 10 times over, and I'll never be able to tell you where it is in the world unless you show me a map, or I can use a camera to go find it.
This is so fascinating. I have so many multiple questions here, but let's just keep going with the story. So you started about 1980, and you said before then you never know what you're going to get.
It's the Wild West, yeah.
It's the Wild West. So now moving on, and there become multiple.
We get a health department.
More technology. You get a health department. So how does that develop over those years?
So the health department, depending on the county you're in, really start to have better records around 1980s. They're starting to do a little oversight. They're starting to do install visits, and that is the rise of PVC.
Mm-hmm.
And we, when we see PVC, we're like, all right, it's at least 1980s-ish and forward.
Right.
And originally they used good PVC, and over time, what happens? We figured out how to skimp out. To the day, I can give you a PVC that's about the size of hair.
Right.
But the older ones, they actually tend to be pretty good. Until you get to 2003, it's basically a septic tank, a distribution box, and 4 to 5 lines.
Okay.
On a 2-bedroom, might be 3 lines. And so you're just going to see that over and over and over again. However, in the same period of time, corrugated plastic comes out. And corrugated plastic, I'm 160 pounds wet. I'm being generous to my weight on that one. And I can, with my left heel, flatten corrugated plastic.
Right. Yeah.
Well, we've been using excavators and skid steers since that period of time, too. Mm-hmm. And we have a traditionally very rocky soil around here. So if the installer has buried that and then took the easy way out of covering it up and just sent the lowest paid employee, very often we're finding crushed corrugated pipes all the way until even a year ago if they've been installed. And we're talking 2022 and that year ago. So corrugated pipes is one of on a for sale inspection, one of the biggest things we're looking for, because they do crush. And when they crush, again, one pipe might be taking all the water. And there's a really important reason that's not what you want.
Wow. And so if you crush a pipe, what are the consequences?
So in Virginia, we can fix anything that's not the drain field. So once the gravel starts, it is out of our hands. Now, there's not to say there's a few little workarounds around that blanket statement, but it's very few options. So if your system was designed to let the water out 5 lines and we crush, say, 2 of those lines, 3 lines are now working at the same rate as the 5 would have. And if you would believe that one sewage spill above the ground on any one of those lines is a failure of your entire system all the way back to your house, that's actually the law. So we don't want 1 line to work or 2 lines or 3 lines to work when 5 is supposed to be working. We're very adamant about fixing those headers. We're very adamant about keeping roots out of those headers because that is what causes, and I've seen it. I've seen 4 brand new lines and 1 line working the whole time, and it failed, and we had to charge the person for a whole new septic system over 1 line failing.
And you're referring to I'll put my real estate hat on. You're referring to whenever somebody's buying or selling a house that has a septic system, it's always good standard, good practice to ask for an inspection. You just never know what you're going to get, especially depending on the age of the house and the age of the septic system. So when that happens, on the buying standpoint, you want to make sure that your septic field is working. On the selling standpoint, you are obligated. You should provide a good working house. So there is a balancing act of when you're going to do an inspection. Yes, you're working for the buyer, but you're also making sure that you're properly communicating to both the buyer and the seller of a house of what does this look like, how does it work, and you're going to be an inspector. But then at the same time, you're also somebody who's like, I can provide the solution. So what do you look for when you go to an inspection like that?
So at the very minimum, we're looking at infrastructure. It's my personal belief that if you lived in a house for 20 years and you decided to do minimal to no maintenance and something fails when you go to sell, unfortunately, that might be the time that you're going to find out that the cost of those behaviors. I cannot tell you how often I've been bragged to on the fact that they were able to get away with 27 years of no pumping, 30 years no pumping.
Oh no, that doesn't sound right.
Because they were put Riddics in there and that they won up the septic guy. And I can tell you that until 3 years ago, I didn't even have a pump truck. I didn't need a pump truck. I subbed all that out. But pumping is the most healthy thing that one can do for their system. But for the inspections, We are looking to protect the person who is purchasing that infrastructure. And even if we're hired by the seller, this is a major transaction for someone's life, and the average septic repair can get quite out of hand in terms of cost. It can go from something that could be hundreds to thousands to, we recently had one that hit almost $90,000 due to the terrain. And that person was unprepared for that bill. However, their house would not be occupiable any longer because they don't have a sewage system. So to answer your question plainly, and on a conventional septic, which is the one that's just the septic tank, the distribution box, the headers, and the ditches, we're looking to see if the septic tank is sound and safe. And we get a lot of feedback from people that it's never been a problem for them before, but we find a lot of cracks, a lot of degradation that you can't see. One of my realtors famously said that she met me with my ankles in the air and my head underground. She's like, she honestly thought there was something wrong with me, but I flipped my head upside down in this tank with a flashlight and I'm looking for cracks because I don't want to be the person that missed the crack that killed the 3-year-old.
I think the first time that we met, you were knee deep in the water and put your hands in the water and said, look at this, look how clean this is. And I think my client who was with me was ready to run for the hills and said, this guy's nuts.
Yeah, it's because it was rainwater. And that was because there was a major leak right there. And there was something, I would never, I have a stomach from fish research, but believe me, there's some incidences in the septic world that have pushed me a little bit further down the rabbit hole on that one. My
Definitely
mom
qualifies for the dirty jobs of the world.
My mom has sometimes, she says, I don't remember why we paid for your college because I know what you do with your time.
Yeah.
But you know what? We solve a lot of problems. In terms of a distribution box, what we're looking for is water softeners, typically eat those, but as do our septic waste. It's really interesting. You can look at a lot of these systems and just think that they're really boring water distribution system, but they're biological and they're very neat. I'm going to use some words here. Sorry about your listeners, and I'm going to keep them as PG as possible, but bacteria fart. They fart a lot. They're gassy little buggers, and there's about a gazillion of them in your system. They're not as important in conventional systems as people have been told. Number one, don't ever use Rid-X. It's the devil. So Rid-X is nothing more than fancy bread yeast that you pay 4 or 5 times the going rate for bread yeast. And what it does is it eats your solid waste and makes smaller solid waste. There's no magic. The solid waste is going into your drain field. That's what's happening. But at the same time, our normal biological communities inside of these things, they take our waste and they eat it, and then what they fart is hydrogen sulfide. The same stuff we put in propane to make sure that you know that it's leaking. Hydrogen sulfide has got this little pesky molecule called sulfur. Sulfur is super acidic when wet. It doesn't seem to hurt anything below the water line, but when it volatilizes off in gas above the water line, it eats concrete like acid. And it eats, if you've ever been afraid of acid rain, this makes acid rain look like kids stuff.
Yeah, sure.
And acid rain is actually hydrogen sulfide from coal plants.
Okay.
But instead, we're keeping it in a cloud inside a concrete box that can't breathe very good.
Right.
So that is to say that a septic tank has 2 holes in it typically. A distribution box comes with 8, 10, 12 holes, and we seal that with something called hydraulic cement. The hydraulic cement has no aggregate in it, so it's highly susceptible to degradation from this gas. At a certain point, I can't fix it. It's not going to hold. If I fix it tomorrow and a year from now, you'll think that I was a liar. So we just stop patching it.
Right.
There's something called parging. We can do that.
Sure.
But there's now times that we've learned, especially over time, that any time past a half inch, 3/4 inch, parging is not the solution. It's going to turn to peanut butter.
So in your experience, there's different levels of what an inspection can entail. You're talking about physically looking at the distribution tank.
Absolutely.
There are some options that buyers can pursue that is just a walkover kind of inspection. There's other inspections that have like now microscopic cameras that can go down into tubes and tanks. Talk to me about the levels and what you would recommend of what the inspection should look like.
So, again, I come from a different world. I really don't like to speak before I know the answers. And because I really hate being wrong. We can talk about a really good story of me being on stage and being put through the the gauntlet of questions,
This is the gauntlet. This is the gauntlet right here.
And I talked from my rear that day, and I got handed my rear as a result. So this is what I do. The walkover inspection is the worst money you can ever spend in your life. I actually have no discount for walkover. If you really want me to do it, I'm going to charge you an excavation rate because I really don't want you to do it. 100% of our walkover inspections call us within the first 6 months and say, what happened?
Why didn't you catch this?
Yeah. And I said, you know what? It's amazing, but I still don't have x-ray vision to see underneath the ground. I cannot see through lids. A walkover inspection, legally, I'm not allowed to even have a tool on site. So I don't suggest this. However, if you have a big black spot in your yard already, you know, that's a cheap way to find out that we need to go get an engineer.
Yeah.
The excavation, the full excavation, which allows us to dig up the lid of a septic tank, if not both of them, each tank has two, and the distribution box is the way to go. In my company, cameras come free because I can't see what I can't see, and the camera, even though now its retail rate is about $8,000 for me to have them, I've got 3. That's how good they are. I actually have a backup for in case one goes down because I can send it to the repair shop and spend the money.
Sure.
Some would argue they're job finders. It's not true. It's not untrue. I find a lot of things that I would never, ever, ever, ever find any other way. Roots and the beginning of roots are found on camera. However, if you ever get a septic inspection from a company like ours and who said, we know it's crushed, we can't show you. What that means is the camera, as soon as it goes underwater, the water actually is black in septic. That's why it's called black water. I just know that we're hitting something where we should be able to see everything we're looking at. And we can tell you where it's at. We just can't show you that problem, especially if the water's back a couple feet.
Good. I mean, that's impressive that you're including that with the inspections. I love it. It's not necessarily just a job finder, but like you said, you're protecting the person who's purchasing the house. And obviously the seller is going to be not a little worried, but they should think, hey, I've got a good septic system. They would know if there's an issue. So again, from a selling perspective, you're not trying to hide anything. It just makes sense for the buyer to come in and make sure they're getting a good house. Now, I'm going to touch on something else that you shared. You mentioned conventional several minutes ago. What are the other alternative systems, especially here in Frederick County, in our local area? We hear that a lot. What's the difference between them and what makes them work?
All right, so we're going to go to the reason alternatives happen, and it's not a gross governmental oversight, which is what I hear all the time. No one is after your money and no one wants to be mean to you. In around 2003, when the law came into effect, the Chesapeake Bay watershed completely collapsed. If you guys remember, there was no crabs or no oysters for all of 2003 and some of 2004. There were some, they were astronomically priced. And that was basically because pollution was hitting our waterways and causing algae blooms until they collapsed and sucking all the oxygen out of these tributaries. We were able to identify 3 sources of this pollution: industrial, farming, and residential, especially high-density residential on septic. So back in the day when it was 100 acres, 200 acres, 500, 5,000, depending how lucky you were, you couldn't hurt the water table if you tried. But now we have places like Mountain Falls. We have Shawnee Land. We have high density even in Winchester. And believe it or not, our septic water can hit the water table before it's treated, especially in high density. Alternative septic systems do nothing more than treat the water the same way that the city water is treated before it hits the river. So we're putting micro water plants in people's yards, and believe it or not, they require maintenance just like the entire staffed water plant.
That's what I was going to ask you.
In order to make it work.
Because part of that means that the county or somebody has to come out and inspect it on a regular basis.
And so the law says that if when you buy or manufacture a home, you sign an agreement with the government that you will have it maintained and taken care of by a professional so the corners aren't cut. And there is not the tightest law in every single county on punishments, and I can tell you I see some really interesting things from day to day in terms of home fixes or lack of service. And I had a few clients that when I got hired, I went there and I said, hey, why are your breakers turned off? And they said, well, my electric bill was like $5 or $6 more a month when they were breakers on, so we just turned those off because they saved a lot of money. That their system literally was just overflowing. They had no idea because they didn't realize their whole system was running on pumps.
Because they didn't check it, they weren't noticing the.
And it was
aren't there lights that you can see?
Absolutely, but if
Okay.
you turn the breakers off in your house,
of course,
there you go.
You're not going to see the lights. Yeah.
So the system has a series of alarms, and if they're put in properly, the alarms are on their own circuit. And the alarms are not there to tell on you; they're there to tell you, like, you might have a problem here soon, both here outside in your yard and in your house, and you might want to have that addressed.
So what would you say to somebody that says, I'm only going to buy a house that's unconventional? I don't know. I don't want to deal with alternative. What would you suggest to that?
So the number one thing I get is that alternative septics are problematic and cost a whole lot. And I will say they are definitely more expensive than conventional. But coming from the suburbs that I did as a childhood, I used to call my mom when she still lived in Manassas and say, hey, what's your water bill this month? And she's about $110. You can run an alternative system for under $40 in most houses. And so my question is are you that opposed to the $40 a month bill?
Right.
Or my bank allows me to open as many bank accounts as I want and have automatic transfers. I suggest every single person on Septic, open a Septic bank account called Septic. Find yourself the highest rate savings account you can, and just transfer $50 a month into it. There's very few things that will happen to you over the course of 15 to 20 years that you won't be able to pull that money out and really, really hammer the problem.
Makes sense.
Without much effort. On the transferring of real estate, that's when sometimes things get real, unfortunately.
Sure.
Because now we're having to address a bigger issue that could have been maintained slowly over the last few years.
I think it's just common sense to understand your home that you live in, understand how it works and what it takes to maintain. And septic is no different, just like your plumbing system, just like your electrical, just like your roof, you name it.
Absolutely. And we used to go out of our way, and I still try as hard as I can. As we grow, it's becoming harder. I mean, I used to know all the dogs and kids and everyone in the house, and even the in-laws' names. And now, today I've gotten 70-some calls. And even on the way here, when I was late about 5 minutes, I was getting more calls.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, we really strive on the intro visits. I try to find at least one person in the house. Quite frankly, it's always the wife that listens way better than the husband. Don't tell the husband that.
Now,
but honestly,
come on.
But honestly, the husband, he already knows, and the wife, she's sitting there taking notes. And so there's a few things I can show you to keep it going in terms of emergencies. And there are times that I spend a lot of effort to try to get people to get through the weekend so they don't have that emergency call fee. I personally don't charge emergency call fees. Most of them are $350 to get the truck out, and it's because we have to pay these employees.
And now you have a truck.
Yeah.
Yes. Now you have advanced in your business, and you have grown in that capacity where you're not just in a Prius, right?
I have way too many trucks. I have a diesel bill that makes me throw up in my mouth.
Well, that's a good thing. It means you've grown. Now, before we do wrap it up, there's one other segment of kind of just conversation I want to touch on very quickly. The concept of a perk system and how many bedrooms a house can have based off the septic field.
Good questions.
Because as an outsider and as someone who doesn't fully understand this, I find it to be vastly ridiculous of counting how a septic field can hold a certain amount of waste only based on the number of bedrooms a house has, not bathrooms, not people. Give me your take on that, because
I'm going to blow your mind, because it's actually people.
Good. As an agent, I find it fascinating that the health department calls it that. So I'll just back up and I'll give more context. A home is going to be given a number of bedrooms that you're allowed to have based off of the soil, right? And so from there, you build a house that constitutes how big a septic field can have. Correct me if I'm wrong. Tell me what this whole world entails of number of bedrooms for septic field.
I'm going to give you the given, and you're going to understand most of what comes next. And because there's the disgusting trend around here, and it's not fair to most of the buyers. A bedroom is 2 people.
Okay.
That's it.
That's it.
So we pretend every person uses 75 gallons of water a day.
Okay.
And a way to linearize this idea is that we don't care if you're a typical American family or one that wants to have 15 kids. Doesn't matter. every bedroom is rated for 2 humans.
Got it.
So a 3-bedroom house
Yep.
can handle 3 or 6 people.
6 people.
Right?
Okay.
At 150 gallons per bedroom,
Okay.
the septic system is made for 450 gallons a day.
Okay.
Here's where I have a big problem in the real estate world, not you all, but the builders.
Okay.
And I'm finally into it, and I found some builders I actually really like on this one. How many people have bought a 3-bedroom house, and the builder told them, we're going to leave the basement undone, there's room for 2 more down there, and then they walk away, and they build a 3-bedroom septic that cannot be upgraded to 5 bedrooms unless you spend an astronomical amount of money.
Right.
The reason is that the size of the septic tank is sized to the amount of bedrooms on the building.
On the building, which constitutes people, which constitutes number of gallons it can handle.
As does the size of the drain field.
Right.
So these builders who sell a 3-bedroom house with the upgrade of 5 bedrooms at a future date are straight line. Because there's no way to do it.
I have a client that we had a transaction on where I was on the buyer side, and it was a different kind of septic company, not yours. Probably should have used yours, but it was on the seller side who was giving us an inspection, and we didn't research until later down the road. It was an obvious 4-bedroom colonial. Well, in West Virginia, for whatever reason, they only constituted it 3, but the builder was legally allowed to build 4 bedrooms, and there's a basement, and now they're having issues. It's very complicated and convoluted of how, which government agency speaks to the other for builder codes, for septic and health department to merge all that together.
They are 2 unrelated departments, and we use them against each other all the time in our industries. The builders are the ones that actually stretch it the furthest. I'm not going to give legal advice. You know more than I do, but in terms of real estate, I do have seen a trend that you're allowed to add conditionally 1 extra bedroom over the septic size on a house. Because most of us don't put 2 people in every bedroom.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
So, however, the situation you're talking about was, in my opinion, I hate to say it, it's fraud.
Sure.
And it's fraud from the builder because they knew before they left that place that if they wanted to build a 5-bedroom, it would have cost them $20,000, $30,000 extra. And they got away, and they took their 2 years leave, and they're gone, and now they're washing their hands of it. I hear it every day. I've seen 3-bedroom houses finished to 5-bedroom. They're wondering well, how do we get it to 5? And a 1,000-gallon tank is the smallest size tank, but a 5-bedroom septic tank's 1,500 gallons. The drain field's an extra 25% larger. And honestly, if you put 10 people in a 3-bedroom house, you're going to fail your septic in under a couple years.
And it's all about the soil, right?
The soil is what writes the story. So when you're by the river, you have a lot of sand in the soil, and it will drain regardless of how much water you put in it, because it's a floodplain.
Right.
You go up in the mountain, you got shale. There's times that some shale, for instance, I live in Frederick County on top of the mountain, and my joke is you can drop a fire truck in my driveway, and by the time it pulls out, I can walk barefoot with dry feet. And I have a 3-bedroom house that the builder said that I could have 5 bedrooms in, no problem.
Yep.
And this is before I knew anything. However, I had been to some spots in between these 2 locations, and if you dumped a 5-gallon bucket on the driveway, it's going to be wet tomorrow. And the soil truly struggles to let it go through. Clay is part of our life. Virginia red clay is famous. We make great bricks. We make great ponds. But we do not make good draining soil where clay exists.
Right.
And those are the places that you're starting to see sand mounds. You see the drip irrigation. And drip is amazing because it allows large amounts of water to go through very small drain fields. But we're actually bringing in 20, 25, 30 dump trucks load of good soil to bury that system in. Not all my competitors are doing that at the moment. And we're seeing some fields that are blowing out because they didn't put enough soil on top to cap it in. But that's the whole idea that the sand mound always was, is the sand mound was a bank. It actually comes all the way from Wisconsin because their winters were so cold. They needed to figure out a way to get this water to go in the ground, and sand and injecting water into it was the way to do it. It works great here, but our sand here is $79 to $99 a ton before I even touch it.
Yeah.
And so it's really, really not economical for most people.
Got it. You are a world of knowledge, and I think we can keep talking for another hour.
Oh, we can go whenever.
But we're gonna shut it down for now, and I'm just gonna say that you've obviously proven your knowledge, but you also, from my standpoint, have proven that you can get the job done. You're not just doing inspections, you're not just doing repairs, you're installing full septic systems. So the full gamut. You can call Matt for all those things. How do we contact you? Because you're also on our real estate site, iconsales.com. You go to the resource page and you'll see Septic and you'll see your stuff pull up. But where is your actual location of how people can get in contact with you?
So we have a super long email, but or email and website. It's Onsite Wastewater Services VA, like Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
There was another company that had the other one for a minute, and they're no longer in business. But so Onsite Wastewater Service, we're out of Gore, and we service all the way from Loudon to Luray, all the way to Warrenton.
That's amazing. Yeah. So Matt, you're the guy to call.
We'll try.
I appreciate you being here. Thanks for sharing so much. I am now far more educated than I was half hour ago.
I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Matt. Appreciate it. Wow. Thank you so much, Matt, for that information, your wealth of knowledge. And, I'll just admittedly say I did learn tons from the conversation. And I hope you guys did as well. And as I referenced, you can go to the iconsales.com website to track him down. You can then also go to his own personal company's website, Onsite Wastewater Service VA.com, as he shared. And yes, he does have more than a Prius right now for us to rely on, that he can get that job done for us in this entire geographical area in the Virginia surrounding area around us. So thanks so much, Matt, for sharing that. Well, before we do leave, I mentioned at the top that it is Memorial Day coming up, so hopefully everybody gets a chance to enjoy the day off on Monday and to remember what has gone through our country over the last 2+ centuries to give us the freedom that we have. So we certainly appreciate all of the veterans, all those family members who are left behind for people who have lost their lives. And here at Iconic Talk, we want to recognize and celebrate that as well. Well, on to what are the events coming up. Without getting into too much detail, I'm just going to highlight a couple. We talk about West Oaks Farmers Market a lot here because they do a lot. But just something fun with the family. On Saturday, they have a strawberry festival where you can go out there and pick strawberries all day from 8 in the morning to 8 at night. It's a super popular thing to do in this time of year, and strawberries are abundant in our area. So go hang out with your family, see the sights, hang out at their festival out there all day. There'll be plenty of activities, things to do at West Oaks on Saturday. And then on Monday, there's plenty of things for Memorial Day, but I'm going to personally be a part of a event. It's the Loudon Street Mile. And if you guys have never seen that or experienced it, I would suggest that you go check it out. It's a morning race. You can either walk, you can run, or your kids can participate in what they call a tot trot. And it's just a straight run. I call it downhill, Loudon Street. So you start a little past Corals Elementary, up that hill a little bit where you're getting close to the intersection of Jewel Early, and you're running straight down Loudon and ending on the walking mall just a little past the intersection there of Bascowan. So that tracks for a mile. And for runners out there, it is a straight sprint, and it's fun because, okay, yes, I did the 10K a couple weeks back for Apple Blossom. That's painful. If you're not a runner like me, that's painful. A mile, I can handle. So go check that out, because for the Loudon Street Mile, you can participate. You can get a T-shirt. It's a great activity to do with your family, with your friends, and go to that webpage. There's actually a link that we'll post on our Iconic Talk social media out there for you to register and sign up for that. So that's where I will be on Monday morning running. Icon Real Estate will be sponsoring it as well. You'll see us down there, get some giveaways, and that'll be a fun event to promote. Well, that is it for us today. I really hope you guys learned something from today's episode, and look forward to sharing more with you next week. Remember, when you look for a real estate professional, make sure they are experienced, innovative, personal, dedicated, and available. We really appreciate you spending your valuable time with us because it is important for you to learn about things, but pass this on to your friends. Let them know how to subscribe and how to share our episodes. There might be one or two that you look back on and be like, oh, my friend would love to hear about that topic. And we are going to continue to share more things about that, about real estate and local happenings around Winchester. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks so much for our editor extraordinaire, Simi Battaglia. Until next time, think iconic.